How far is 60 meters? Well, let me show you. Oh. That's 30 meters. That's as far as our tape measure goes. You'd have to double that in order to appreciate just how far hundreds of rescuers had to go in order to reach a group of 41 miners trapped in a collapsed tunnel. But they did it. They've drilled through 60 meters of rock, concrete, and metal, ending a 17-day roller coaster ride. So how'd they manage that? So this is a simplification of the challenge at hand. It's not to scale, but it gives you the basic idea. So the miners were trapped inside a mountain. The tunnel that they dug to get there collapsed, cutting them off from the outside world. The whole thing is meant to be part of a billion-dollar expansive highway network. But since November 12th, when part of the tunnel collapsed, all of the focus has been on this 60-meter wall of rock and debris. So why couldn't they just drill them out? I mean, they got there in the first place. Just do that again. Except the second time you go through, the entire equation has changed.
The initial plan to push steel pipes that would be wide enough for the men to crawl out of the debris have now failed.
The rescuers' worst fear was that all that digging would trigger a collapse in the part of the tunnel that's keeping these miners alive. You know, they actually managed to drill a very small hole to the miners, a mini tunnel just big enough to squeeze through food, water, oxygen, medication, walkie-talkies, that sort of thing. And of course, they slipped through an endoscopic camera that gave us scenes like this.
Vishal. Yes.
But any kind of digging, when you're trying to protect what you're digging towards, is risky. And the bigger the tunnel, the greater the risk of collapse.
There's no structural integrity there. So it's like trying to, dig through a pile of snow where you just don't know when it's going to fail or what's going to fail. So everything has to be calculated and risk versus reward throughout the whole process.
Some attempts were, in fact, delayed or called off because of falling debris, and because the risk to the trapped miners was considered too high. But the other problem was how their drills kept breaking.
The auger machine, which is very, very powerful, building this tunnel through the avalanche material, it's finding it really hard, and it's teasing us because we're only just meters away, but the machine is run out of, it's like a little bit broken.
So one of the drills rescuers tried to use is US-made by American augers. You can see in this old YouTube video how it works. This is from a different company, but the premise is the same. You start by drilling a pilot hole about 3 feet across, and the earth you're drilling through gets channeled backwards through the pipe. You can weld on additional sections of pipe as you get progressively deeper and jettison the rock and soil out the same way you came in. But the second time you go through, you're not just pushing through rock anymore. Remember, this was part of a much larger tunnel project for an actual highway. So all of the concrete structural supports and twisted metal girders crushed by the collapse, even entire construction vehicles pulverized by falling earth. It's all mixed in.
And the things that we hit, they're like machines. Like, see the big machine up on the hill. There's one of them in there. There's a big dumper in there. There's all these machines, and there's the crushed tunnel. So we're trying to find a path through all of this and the rocks.
And just boring through rock requires specialized equipment. It's already tougher than soil, clay, and silt, but throw concrete and metal into the mix, the whole process becomes more painstaking, more unstable, more dangerous.
What makes this rescue operation so complicated is that they're not only dealing with rubble and debris, but they're also dealing with construction material, pieces of metal, and that's what the drill keeps getting caught on.
The auger bits and the drilling machines are designed for usually drilling through solid rock. So when they're hitting those other materials, it causes damage, and it's at no fault of the driller. They don't know what they're drilling into.
So you have this impossibly delicate balance between needing raw power and a very delicate touch. So for the final stretch, they had to dig partially by hand. Rat hole mining is a very primitive form of mining that you'll find in some parts of India. It's essentially mining by hand, usually in very cramped spaces, tunnels that are only big enough for one person to work.
There's one man that goes down a narrow tunnel, another man clears the rubble, and then a third takes that rubble away on a trolley.
A dozen of these so-called rat miners were brought in and worked on a rotation to push through the final few meters of the rescue tunnel. As you might imagine, it's very slow and incredibly dangerous work. Okay, so we came down here in the basement to just give you a little bit of a sense of what the space and size of the tunnel might feel like. This is about 90 centimeters across, which is almost exactly 3 feet. Not very large. But the idea is, once you've managed to break through that tunnel all the way to the other side, and you've laid down your pipe, you've welded together the sections that you need to weld together, then the real rescue can begin. And the way they do that is by pushing a stretcher on wheels all the way through the tunnel to the other side, to the miners. A miner would get onto the stretcher, and then that stretcher is pulled all the way back. That's the basic idea. You do that one at a time, 41 times, 41 miners. And the idea is that it doesn't actually take all that long because the distance is so short. Less than an hour to get everybody out.
This is an incredible rescue after more than 2 weeks underground. All 41 workers trapped inside a collapsed tunnel in India have been pulled to safety.
41 ambulances were on standby, waiting outside for the 41 miners. Helicopters also ready to airlift people out in case of emergency, and a legion of family, friends, and rescuers ready to celebrate.
Good job, goodbye.
Well done. Well done, Bhaskar. Well done, yaar.
मतलब क्या है ये तो आधिकारिक तौर पे बाद में पता चलेगा, लेकिन एनडीआरएफ की टीम, एसडीआरएफ की टीम दोनों हाथ में.
So now, with the rescue over, the questions begin. How are the victims? Well, some have been treated for dysentery. Others may develop PTSD from being trapped underground for 2.5 weeks. Then there's the accountability.
Hopefully they take a step back and look at the bigger picture so that, we're not talking about this story again in, 6 months or 9 months.
Environmentalists and locals have been warning officials repeatedly. There have also been legal cases against this type of construction because the area is very prone to landslides, very prone to major flooding, and the soil is not solid.
The whole world just watched this country literally dig itself out of a mess. But why did the tunnel cave in? The region is dangerous for digging, prone to landslides, but was this unavoidable? Why didn't the tunnel have an emergency exit? India's Highway Authority is carrying out an audit now of 29 similar tunnels, where building is still currently in progress, because this story had a happy ending, but they don't want this to happen again.